Our hearts go out to the Italian boxer Angela Cabrini. I mean, she's the fighter who decided that 46 seconds of dealing with an XY opponent in the Olympic boxing ring was enough time for her to decide she'd just rather protect herself. Now, I did watch that so called fight, and Angela's a southpaw. Her opponent is an orthodox stance fighter, so when her opponent landed a straight right on her, Angela decided, okay, that's enough, and so she walked back to her corner and said, I guess to the effect of, I'm not, I'm done. Now, it also looked that she was rather annoyed with her corner and had, more than a few words for them. I have yet to see that come out in the press as to what was said, because nobody was mic'd up in her corner. Here's my guess. Your corner is supposed to be the ones that are looking out for you, right? And so when she knew, or they knew well ahead, that this was not a surprise, that they were going to face this Algerian XY fighter. The draw sheets are done, in advance, like days in advance. And surely everybody knew, because we all know, this has been all over the media, that there's a Taiwanese XY and an Algerian XY. So Angela, I would have guessed, if I were her, I would have said, look, I'm really concerned about fighting this person. And the athlete would have voiced their concern to their coaches, and then to the manager, their representatives from their Italian Olympic Committee, probably present at the games. I'm sure that would have been communicated to them. And here's my guess, and I don't know, but here's my guess, is someone said, well, look, you know what? You got to go out there and represent Italy anyways. If you win, you win. If you lose, you lose. But you have to go out there because XYZ, politically, we can't just forfeit the match or whatever it is. I'm somehow pretty sure that it was the politicians that kind of pushed Angela out there into the ring, probably somewhat against her will. Or, I don't know what else she could have asked for, but certainly as a woman, why would I ever agree to fighting somebody I know is male? That just makes no sense. So I can fully empathize with her and assume that she at least protested to her own people. Like, I think this is wrong and I don't think we should do it. And I'm guessing that they pushed back and said, oh, you know what, we have to save face or whatever. Hence, after the 45 seconds of her dealing with this XY, she just said to them, no, I'm not doing this anymore. This is enough. Enough is enough. And she felt the force of that straight right hand. And yeah, that's enough. Enough is enough. Plus, this Algerian fighter is much, much bigger. I'm assuming they both weighed in at the same time in the morning of the fight, and so both of them had exactly the same amount of time to rehydrate. But as we know, males can dehydrate and rehydrate at a greater rate than females. Female bodies are designed to hang on to water and fat for biological reasons. A man can shed 10 pounds in the sauna to make weight. A man can shed 10 pounds in the sauna in a day and make weight. A woman cannot do that, and really should not even attempt to do that, because it'll mess her up, probably for life, actually. But in any case, I don't know what their walking in the ring weight is, but the Algerian is certainly much taller than Cabrini, and also had the reach. And then, of course, they're XY, so they have that advantage too. So, I mean, I absolutely don't fault her for saying enough is enough after 45, 46 seconds. My heart goes out to her because, and I think all of us, we know that she's dedicated her whole life to this dream of the Olympics. She fought in the Tokyo Olympics, and she made a promise to her father, who was dying at the time, about, not stopping, and she's going to keep going and pursue her dream um, at the Paris Games. So I mean, there's that poignant aspect to her story too, but that should not neither add to nor take from the just absolute injustice that was dealt to her, not only by the IOC, but perhaps even by her own Italian governing body and her own Italian Olympic Committee, if they did not give her permission to withdraw. If she wished to withdraw and they said, no, you got to go out there and represent Italy, I don't think that's cool either, because it's not like they're the ones getting in the ring. They're forcing a female athlete to face off with an XY male athlete. That's they should be held accountable as well. But of course, the IOC, everyone's slamming the IOC for allowing this in the first place, and rightfully so, because this is not even, unfortunately, some media person, I think on Sky Sports, said, oh, well, this is just such a complicated affair. It's like, no, it isn't. It really isn't. XX, female. XY, male. The only way this gets complicated is if somebody has both XX and XY. That's not the case. As far as I know, for these two individuals at this games, it has been stated that the International Boxing Association, the amateur international governing body for boxing that has replaced what used to be called IABA. So this new governing body deemed that both XY fighters were not eligible for the Boxing World Championships because they were, in fact, had XY chromosomes. So on that basis, I'm not sure why they're now allowed to participate at the Olympic Games. Supposedly, it's because the IOC said, well, we're going by what it says on their passport. Okay, that's not biological. That's just what you can get put on your driver's license or passport and birth certificate. These are all documents that can get changed over time, right? So, in any case, but circling back to this business of chromosomes, I just don't know of any other way, more objective way to determine gender other than looking at chromosomes, which are the DNA in every one of your cells. Okay, so let's look into what I said. The only way it could be more complicated, as this Sky Sports person puts it, would be if these individuals had both XX and XY chromosomes. Now that does happen, it's very rare, and that results in hermaphroditism. Someone is a hermaphrodite if they have both sets of chromosomes. Now, this actually did happen back in the 90s. There was a judoka from Brazil named Edinanci Silva. Hopefully I pronounced that right. And she fought in the 72 kilogram division. Now, this was kind of a widely observed / known issue certainly amongst female judoka, especially the women who were in her division, because by appearances, a lot of people would look at Edinanci and say, oh, that's a male. And so the judo governing body initially didn't really know, quote unquote, what to do about this. And they actually, this is horrible, but they subjected all women in that weight division to a visual exam, which involved them all lying on a table on their back and spreading their legs. This is given to me firsthand by the Canadian judoka who had to go through this because she happened to be in that same weight division. Okay, so that's clearly not a very scientific test, and it's more than a little bit inappropriate, but that's what international judo decided to do at that point. This is before the Olympic Games in '96, by the way. So prior to the Olympic Games, I I read that in a French publication called Libération. According to this French publication, prior to the Olympic Games, Silva had an operation performed by a urologist named Fabio Koff, in which Silva had a bilateral orchiostomy. Okay, so that means that two testicles were removed. Now, I'm going to assume these were undescended testicles. Don't have the gory details. And also, a hypertrophied female organ was also reduced. So there's this sort of double operation done, presumably so that Silva would not have super high levels of testosterone that would be present in a hermaphrodite due to the fact that they have testicles, descended or not descended. So this was done prior to the 96 Olympic Games. Okay, so then when Silva shows up at the Olympic Games, as far as I know, they did the cheek swab chromosome test. And I had it on from a highly reliable source who happened to be an official at that Games, who's also a PhD academic and professor at college at the time. Anyways, and he had no reason to make any of this up. I was certainly not acting in the role of a journalist. I was simply there as an athlete and volunteer for the Games. And so, of course, this topic came up, and he told me, well, you know what? They did the DNA test, the cheek swab DNA test on Silva. He goes, it came back exactly 50-50. She has 50% XX, and she has 50% XY. So that means she gets to choose. He said to me, if it had come back 51-49 in either direction, they could have insisted that she compete in, whatever gender that happened to be, the 51%. But he said, no, it came exactly 50-50. We give her choice. Okay. I mean, that's fair, right? Because we're going back down to the chromosomes. However, if somebody has all XY, they don't get to say, I want to compete with all the XXs just because I have a female name on my passport and it says I'm female on my passport. That's not okay. Now here's the second sort of aspect of Silva competing in judo. Do you think she won the gold medal? Do you think she was ever world champion? Actually, she wasn't. She and this is not to take away from her accomplishments, but she finished 7th at the Atlanta Olympic Games. I think she did move up to 78 kilos and finish out her career at a heavier division. But point being that in spite of having 50% XY chromosomes, it wasn't enough for her to, she just didn't just trounce through her whole division. Now here's why, because judo is different than a striking sport. With a striking sport, you could be XY and a complete spaz, and you could still do a lot of damage to an XX of the same weight division. Why? Because you're able to just generate so much more torque on your punches. You don't even need to have super great technique. If you just literally throw stuff against the wall, just start winging punches, you happen to land one, that's all it takes, because there's so much more torque on that one punch than what the female could absorb or generate on her part. Even with the best of timing and technique, the female will still not be able to generate the same amount of torque on their punch. So definitely the XY factor is not only not fair, it's absolutely dangerous in something like boxing, because that extra torque is getting applied to somebody's skull. Okay, whereas in judo, we're grabbing a uniform that we call a judogi. We are trying to throw somebody onto their back on the mat. And so we're not trying to damage. The objective of judo is not to damage somebody. It's to use your technique to throw them through the air and have them land flat on their back. from there, you do want to follow through and either pin, choke, or get an armbar. But um, there's so much more technique involved in judo that, I mean, I think this is part of the reason why even having 50% XY chromosomes and therefore 50% XY musculature and skeletal features still was not enough in and of itself for Silva to just completely dominate in the sport of judo. So I hope the sort of the physics of all that makes sense. Judo absolutely relies on perfect timing and good, at least very good technique, and just hours and hours of practice. And so these are all things that can't be sort of erased with just more male